Hello everybody, welcome to English class. How are you all? In this video, we are going to learn the beautiful short story Gooseberries by Anton Chekhov. You must be familiar with this author because you have learned his stories, right? Wonka and so many other touching stories he has written. Okay, so let's get into the chapter now. Before that, let's know something about the author. Anton Chekhov, the Russian author, Anton Pavlovich Chekhov, 1860-1904, a Russian physician, dramatist, and author. Chekhov is one of the greatest short story writers. His career as a dramatist produced 4 classics, and his best short stories are held in high esteem by writers and critics alike. So he is one among the topmost short story writers. Gooseberries is the middle story in a trilogy of Chekhov's tales. The first titled The Man in a Shell and the last titled About Love. So 3 stories were there in the book and this one was among them, right? And the first and last are The Man in a Shell and About Love. All are united in theme, the isolation and escape from life. So all the 3 stories in this book are united in its theme. What's its theme? Isolation and escape from life. The story is one of the Chekhov's finest works and has much irony and humor and is poetic in mood. So this story is very famous and it's known for its irony and humor in the story, and it's a bit poetic too. Okay, let's see that. Yeah, a short description of the story. Chekhov's Gooseberries is a story of 2 brothers who pursue happiness in their own ways. 2 brothers are presented there in the story, and each of them pursue happiness in their own way. So for one, finding happiness may be different, and for the other, happiness may be something else, right? So they try to find happiness in their own ways. The story provides ample opportunities to examine critically the ways they have chosen. So this story gives us enough chances to observe how people choose their way of happiness, right? The extent to which they attain their goal is also worth considering. Then how do they achieve their goal? At last, what happens? How do they enjoy their happiness? I mean, their goal. Things like that are being discussed here in this story. Okay, now let's begin the story. Gooseberries. So you already know what gooseberry is, right? It's a fruit of a tree which tastes sour in the beginning and which tastes sweet later, right? So that's gooseberries. From early morning, the sky had been overcast with clouds. So the story begins like this. From early morning itself, the sky is filled with rainy clouds. The days was still cool and wearisome. Clouds were there, but no rain. So this day it was still cool and wearisome. Wearisome means making you tired, right? So there was a cloud, but it was not raining, so it was making you tired. And still it was, still means not more remarkable works going on, and cool, it was cool there, right? As usual, on grey, dull days when the clouds hang low over the fields and it looks like rain, which never comes. It just happens the same way, right? The same way all the days when there are clouds in the sky and which does not come pour out as rain, all the people abstain from their work. They are reluctant to go for work and the day looks inactive, right? Yep. Ivan Ivanich, the veterinary surgeon, and Borkin, the schoolmaster, were tired of walking, and the field seemed endless to them. So Ivan Ivanich, the surgeon, veterinary surgeon, and Borkin, the schoolmaster, both of them were walking through the field, and they felt that the field does not end. It seemed endless because they have been walking for a long time, right? The word meaning wearisome, which makes one tired. Right, so the day was wearisome means it makes the people tired. It's weather, right? Far ahead, they could just see the windmills of the village of Miroski. In the calm weather, when all nature seemed gentle and melancholic, Ivan Ivanich and Burkin were filled with love for the fields and thought how grand and beautiful the country was. So they continued, they're walking through the field, and far ahead they could see the windmills, right? Windmills of the village of Miroski. And in the calm weather, as we said, it was calm, inactive, now people are going for work. So it's calm weather when all nature seemed gentle and melancholic. Melancholic means sad, sorrowful, right? Melancholic. Ivan Ivanich and Borkin were filled with love for the fields. They loved the field, how it looked, right? And thought how grand and beautiful the country was. They looked at the field and they exclaimed how beautiful they are, how beautiful country life is. This they thought. Last time when we stopped in Prokofiev's shed, said Borkin, you were going to tell me a story. So Borkin reminds Ivan that he was about to tell him a story when they were standing there, when they stopped in Prokofiev's shed. They stood there and Ivan was about to start a story, but he didn't tell them. Yes, I wanted to tell you about my brother. Ivan responds, yes, actually I was, and I wanted to tell you the story of my brother. Ivan Ivanich took a deep breath and lighted his pipe before beginning his story. Then he took a deep breath and he lighted his pipe before he starts his story. But just then the rain began to fall. So far there were clouds in the sky and waiting to be showered, right? There were clouds waiting to shower, but the shower starts only now. The rain began to fall, and in about 5 minutes, it came pelting down and showed no signs of stopping. So it continued. Pelting down means throw out. So it was just like throwing out the water, right? Pouring out. So it came pelting down and showed no sign of stopping. So it continued and showed no sign of stopping. So they have to stop their journey. So far they were walking through the field, and now it started to rain. Then we ought to take shelter. They have to take shelter somewhere, otherwise they will get drenched, no? They will get wet. Said Burkin, let's go to Alyokin's. It's close by. Then, yes, then we can take shelter. Let's go to Alyokin's house. It's close by. We can take shelter there. Very well. Then they take shelter. Pelting means throwing. The rain pelted means started to throw, means it came out just like pouring, right? It started to pour out. They took a shortcut over a stubble field until they came to the road. So as it was raining, they had to take shelter. They took a shortcut through the stubble field. Stubble field means a field which were harvested. Cut only the remaining of cut trees or bushes remain. Okay, stubble means the leftover part of cut plants. So the field has been harvested, right? Only the remaining part of the plants remain there. Only the root part of the plants remained there in the field, and they took their way to Alyokin's house until they came to the road. Soon they came to a wide road with a mill and a white bathing shed. So soon, by walking their way, they soon came to a wide road with a mill and a white bathing shed. It was Sofino where Alyokin lived. So that place is known as Sofino where Alyokin lived. The mill was working, drowning the sound of the rain. So even at that time, the mill was working, drowning the sound of the rain. Already the rain was pouring out. It was loud, but the sound of the mill drowned the sound of the rain. It was wet, muddy, and unpleasant, and Ivan Ivanich and Burkin felt wet and uncomfortable through and through. Their feet were tired with walking in the mud. So they had got wet and it was mud. They were walking through the field, so they got mud on their legs, and as they were wet, they felt uncomfortable throughout the time, all the time, because their feet were covered with mud and they were wet too. In one of the barns, a winnowing machine was working, sending out clouds of dust. One of the threshold stood Alyokin himself. On the threshold stood Alyokin himself, a man of about 40, tall and stout with long hair, more like a professor or a painter than a farmer. Okay, in one of the barns, a winnowing machine was working. So barns, you all know, right, where the grains are kept. So in one of the barns, a winnowing machine was working. Winnowing means a machine that used to remove the skin of grains, right? So a winnowing machine was working, sending out clouds of dust. So as it works, it blows air to the grain from which the outer skin of the grains will be thrown away, the husks, right, will be removed. So it looked like a smoke, right, and sending out the clouds of dust. So as it was working, as it was blowing air to the grains, dust were sending out the clouds of dust. On the threshold stood Alukin himself. So on the threshold at the door, Alukin himself, he was standing there, a man about 40. Alukin was 40, tall and stout. Stout means fit, well built, okay, strong, with long hair, more like Alukin looked like a painter or a professor than a farmer. Actually, Alukin was a farmer. He works in his field, but his appearance looked like a painter or like that of a professor. Okay. He was wearing a grimy white shirt and raw belt and pants instead of trousers, and his boots were covered with mud and straw. His nose, eyes were black with dust. He recognized Ivan Ivanich and was apparently very pleased. He was wearing a grimy white shirt. He was wearing an untidy white shirt. Right, grimy means dirty white shirt and raw belt. He had a raw belt and pants instead of trousers, and his boots were covered with mud and straw because he's working in the field, right? So his boots were covered with mud and straw. His nose and eyes were black with dust. Working in the field, his eyes and nose were black, covered with dust. He recognized Ivan Ivanich and was apparently very pleased. So seeing Ivan Ivanich, his friend, his old friend, he felt so happy. Please, gentlemen, he said, go to the house, I'll be with you in a minute. So, come on, gentlemen, please go to my house, I'll be there with you in a minute. Right, I'll be with you in a minute. The house was large and two-storied. So, Alukin's house was very large and two-storied. Alukin lived downstairs in two vaulted rooms with little windows. So, Alukin lived there downstairs with vaulted. Vaulted means just like an arch, rooms just like an arch. Right, vaulted rooms with little windows, and there were no windows. Ivan Ivanich and Burkin were received by a chambermaid. So as they went to the house, they were invited, they were received by a chambermaid. A lady lives there in the house, right? Probably Alukin's wife. She received them. You cannot imagine how glad I am to see you, gentlemen, said Alukin. Alukin said, I'm so glad to have you as my guest today, coming after them into the hall. So he also came to the hall. I never expected you. I never expected you people to come here. Pelageya, he said to the maid, give my friends a change of clothes. So he asks Pelageya, the lady, the maid there in his house, he asks her to give them a change of clothes. And I will change too. Give them change of clothes and I will change too, but I must have a bath. I have to take my bath. Then I'll change my clothes. I haven't had one since the spring. I haven't taken my bath since the spring. He never used to take his bath every day, right? He hadn't taken it since the spring. Wouldn't you like to come to the bathing shed? So you people don't you want to come to the bathing shed? And meanwhile, our things will be got ready. So when we take our bath there in the bathing shed, all the other things will be get ready here, and we'll have a great time. Then he asked Alukin, Ivanich and Burkin to follow him to the bath shed. Alukin led his guests to the bathing shed. Yes, he said, it's a long time since I had a bath. So as he was leading them to the bath shed, he shares, it's been so long since I had my bath. My bathing shed is all right, as you see. Yes, I have got a big bathing shed. Actually, Alukin has got a big bathing shed of his own. Still, he does not take his bath every day, right? Because he doesn't have time. He's busy with his works in the field. So here we see different types of people, and people pursue their happiness in different way. That's how here Alukin follows his happiness. His happiness is in working so hard and earning money, right? And he has big house. He has got workers there in house. He has got a big bath shed. Still, he works so hard, and he doesn't care for his hygiene, right? Physical hygiene, okay. My My father and I put it up, but somehow I have no time to bath. I and my father put it up, right? We constructed this bathshed, but I don't have time to bath. He sat down on the step and lathered his long hair and neck. So sitting on the step, he lathered means applied soap on his long hair and neck, and the water around him became brown. So as he was sitting there on the step, the water around him, the water which touched his body turned brown because he works in the field and he got mud on him, right? He doesn't take bath for a long time. He hasn't taken bath for a long time, so the area where he was standing turned brown. Lathered means soaked. Okay. Ivan Ivanich came out of the shed, plunged into the water with a splash, and swam about in the rain. So Ivan Ivanich, who just they took shelter in Alokin's house only because of the rain, right? But at this moment, as he saw the bathing shed, he also felt like having a dip, right? So he dived into the water with a splash, plunged into the water with a splash, and swam about in the rain. So he's swimming in the rain. It's so funny to swim in the rain, right? Flapping his arms and sending waves back. So he just flapping his hands in the water. He moved forward. He swam out to the middle of the pool and dived, trying to reach the bottom, right? So he swam to the middle of the pool, and he tried to dive to the bottom, to touch the bottom. Oh, how delicious! He shouted in his glee, right? He shouted, how delicious, how fantastic, how excited am I here to be, how excited I'm here, things like that. So he shouted in his happiness, how delicious. Borkin and Alyokin were already dressed and ready to go. So Borkin and Alyokin, they were ready to go. Borkin was just simply sitting there, and Alyokin, he took his bath and he was about to lay to. He had put on his clothes, but still Ivan Ivanich kept swimming, right? But he kept on swimming and diving. Delicious, he said. So he felt so happy, and he was swimming and swimming. Delicious, too delicious. You have had enough, shouted Borkin. So Borkin said, you have had enough, stop. That's enough, right? Just stop and join us. He wasn't stopping, right? Ivan Ivanich kept on swimming, and they were about to leave the place. Still he was swimming. Then Borkin called out to join them. Stop and join us, right? They went to the house, and only when the lamp was lit in the large drawing room upstairs, and Borkin and Ivan Ivanich, dressed in silk dressing gowns and warm slippers, lounged in chairs, and Alyokin himself washed and brushed in a new frock coat, paced up and down, did Ivan Ivanich begins his story. Right, so Ivan Ivanich was able to tell a story. So this story is a story inside story. Already we are telling a story, and inside this story, Ivan Ivanich is going to tell the story. Right, they went to the house, and only when the lamp was lit, they lit the lamp in the large drawing room upstairs, and Borkin and Ivan Ivanich, dressed in silk dressing gowns, they were dressed in silk dressing gowns given by Alyokin, and warm slippers, they wore slippers too, lounged in chairs, and they sat in chairs. And Alyokin himself washed and brushed in a new frock. Alyokin himself took his bath, and he had put on new clothes, and paced up and down, and he walked here and there, up and down. So it was at this particular time did Ivan Ivanich began his story. Only now he begins. Ivan Ivanich starts to tell the story which he was about to tell. We are two brothers. He is talking about his brother's story, right? We are two brothers, he began. I, Ivan Ivanich, and Nikolai Ivanich. I, Ivan Ivanich, and my brother, Nikolai Ivanich. 2 years younger. My brother, Nikolai Ivanich, is 2 years younger to me. I went in for study and became a veterinary surgeon. And Ivan Ivanich went for study. He studied so hard and he became a veterinary surgeon, while Nikolai was at the Exchequer Court when he was 19. But Nikolai, he was in Exchequer Court, means he just worked just like a clerk in when he was 19 at Exchequer Court, right? He was working there just like a clerk, not a glamorous job, and he started in his 19 itself. Our father, Chimsha Himalayski, was a cantonist, but he died with an officer's rank and left us in his title of nobility and small estate. But our father, he was from soldier, right? He was in army and he was as a Cantonist. Our father, Chimsha Himalaski, was a Cantonist, but he died with an officer's rank and left us his title of nobility and a small estate. So his father, Al- Ivan Ivanitz and Nikolai's father was a Cantonist. Cantonist means the underage sons of some soldiers, the soldiers who were forcefully joined, who were forcefully taken to military, and their sons are known as Cantonists, right? So Ivan Ivanich's father was a Cantonist, means his Ivan Ivanich's grandfather was taken to military forcefully, so his son Ivan's father was a Cantonist, but he died as an officer with an officer's rank, and he left for them an estate and the nobility of his position. Okay, after his death, the estate went to pay his debts, but actually he had a lot of debt, and the whole estate went to pay his debts. However, we spent our childhood there in the country. So Ivan Ivanich and Nikolai had nothing to enjoy from his father's heritage, from his father's hair. Nothing, nothing remained for them from his father's earnings. So they just lived just like any other common boy. We spent our childhood there in the country. We were just like peasants' children. They were just like peasants' children, even if their father was an officer. Spent days and nights in the fields and the woods. They spent days and nights in the field and wood, minded the horses, barked the lime trees, fished, and so on. Okay, spent days and nights in the fields and the woods, minded the horses. They took care of the horses, barked the lime trees, removed the skin of the lime trees as job, right? They did all these jobs, fished, and so on. So many jobs they did to find a livelihood. And you know, once a man has fished or watched the thrushes hovering in flocks over the village in the bright, cool autumn days, he can never really be a townsman, and to the day of his death, he will be drawn to the country. Right? So he explains the beauty of the place, beauty of the countryside, and how does it attract people. Okay, and you know, once a man has fished, so if you have fished in the country, or watched the thrushes hovering in flocks, thrush means a kind of bird, right? So if you had watched the thrushes hovering in flocks over the village, so they hover, they fly in group over the village, and if you see this sight in the bright, cool autumn days, he can never really be a townsman. So he will never leave the countryside. He will never leave the country, and he can never be a townsman. And to the day of his death, he will be drawn to the country. And until his death, he will be taken back to the country life, because he has tasted its beauty, and he has admired its beauty. So he can never leave the country life, and he can never be a townsman. And to the day of his death, he will be drawn to the country. My brother pined away in the exchequer. My brother worked a lot. He struggled a lot in the exchequer as a clerk. Years passed and he sat in the same place. Years passed and he sat in the same place, wrote out the same documents, and thought of one thing. And he had only one thing to think: how to get back to the country. So they had to go back to the country. So far, they don't have a house there. They don't have place there, because the only thing that was left for them was their father's estate, and it was sold to pay his debt. Right. So now Ivan Ivanich's brother Nikolai Ivanich works so hard in exchequer's desk. He does a lot of tiresome works only to go back to the country. Right. How to get back to the country, and to buy a small farm somewhere by the bank of a river or a lake. And he had the dream of going back to the country life. He had to buy a house, and he had to buy a farm nearby a river. So that's what his dream, and he worked terribly hard for his dream. Okay. He was a good fellow, and I loved him. My brother was a good fellow, and I loved him. But I never sympathized with the desire to shut oneself up on one's own farm. But what his matter is, he has one aim, and he has shut up himself in that dream. He forgets all the other thing, and he works to achieve his goal, and he leads a very difficult life, right? So I never sympathized with the desire to shut oneself up in one's own farm. So he shut up himself in his own dream of buying a farm. It's a common saying that a man needs only 6 feet of land. Usually people say a man needs only 6 feet of land, but surely a corpse wants that. But it's not a man, not a man. And a man does it, it's not enough for a man to have 6 feet of land. Only a corpse need, after our death, we need 6 feet of land to get ourselves buried, right? So for a man, that's not enough. To leave town and the struggle and the swim of life and go and hide yourself in a farmhouse is not life. It's egoism, laziness. So Ivan thinks that to leave the town and find yourself calm in a village, leaving all the troublesome life in the town, and you find it happiness there only in the village, and keeping away from all the struggles and all the fights, he says it's laziness and egoism, right? So it's just like running away from the reality of life, right? To leave town and the struggle and the swim of life and go and hide yourself in a farmhouse. So leave the town and run away from the life in the town and take shelter in a farmhouse is not life. It's not a life. It's just egoism and laziness, right? So if you are not ready to face, encounter the reality of life when you live in a town, then it's not a life at all, he feels. Ivan says so, right? My brother Nikolai, sitting in his office, would dream of eating out in the open air. So my brother Nikolai Ivanich, he's just a clerk, and there sitting in his office, he would dream of eating out in the open air. Yes, he would take food sitting lavishly in open air. It's his dream, right? And of sleeping in the sun. So he can sleep in the sun freely, and of sitting for hours together on a seat by the gate and gazing at the field and the forest. And he dreamt of sitting hours and hours in his same chair and observe his field, his forest. Then he dreamt of all these things. Books on agriculture and the hints in almanacs were his joy, his favorite spiritual food. So he used to read books, and he used to take the hints in almanacs. Almanacs means a kind of book where you can find the horoscopes, right? So he has the habit of looking at his horoscope, what happens to him this month later, things like that, right? So books and the hints in almanacs were his joy. So he found happiness reading them. His favorite spiritual food. These were his spiritual food. And he liked reading newspapers. He used to read newspapers, but only the advertisements of land to be sold. He liked reading newspaper, but he would read only advertisements. That too about land to be sold, because he had the dream of buying a farm. All right, we said in the beginning. So land to be sold with a farmhouse, river, garden, mill and mill pond. So he would read the advertisement, and he wants to buy a place where there is a land with farmhouse, river, garden, mill and mill pond. All these things together he should get. Then always he would read newspapers, only the advertisement column to find. And he would dream of garden walls, flowers, fruits, nest, carp in the pond, don't you know, and all the rest of it. Then his work is in a clerk. He sits in the exchequer's bench, the treasury, right? Exchequers means treasury, right? And in the office he would sit and he would dream of all these things, of garden walls, flowers, fruits, nest, birds with nest, right? Carp means a kind of a fish. Carp in the pond, don't you know, and all the rest of it, everything he would dream. These fantasies of his used to vary according to the advertisements he found. And these fantasies, these thoughts may change as per the advertisements he sees in the newspaper, right? Sometimes he sees some other things, then he will just change, yes, that's better than this. Then he would change his fantasy, right? But somehow there was always gooseberry bush in everyone. But whatever changes, he never changes the idea of having a gooseberry bush in the place, right? In the land which he is going to buy, there should be some gooseberry trees, gooseberry plants in everyone. Not a house, not a romantic spot could he imagine without its gooseberry bush. For him, a house is not a house and a place is not a romantic until there is some gooseberry bush, right? So he would never dream of a place where there is no gooseberry. Okay. Country life has its advantages. Evan says, country life has its own beauty, its own advantages. He used to say, my brother used to say, country life is special. It has its own advantages. You sit on the veranda drinking tea and your ducklings swim on the pond and everything smells good and there are gooseberries. My brother used to say, country life has its own advantages and you can sit freely, you can observe your duckling swimming there in the pond and you can see your own fruits, your own trees and gooseberries, everything you can see, right? So it has its own advantage than what you have there in town life. He used to live meagerly and never had enough to eat and drink. My brother used to eat only less meagerly and never had enough to eat and drink. Dressed God knows how. He dressed, we don't know how he dressed, exactly like a beggar. He dressed just like a beggar. So look, how do people find happiness, right? In the case of Ivan Ivanich, he's okay with town's life and he lives a somewhat a standard life. He's a surgeon, right? And in the case of Nikolai, he has a bigger dream and he has got a really low income and still to achieve his dream, he finds some other ways, right? He leads a very miserable life. He eats meagerly and he dressed just like a beggar and always saved and put his money into the bank. And he saved money and put it in his bank. And this is how he finds his happiness, right? He was terribly stingy. Yes, he was terribly stingy means smells, right? He gives bad smell. It used to hurt me to see him. Yes, when I see my brother this way, it used to hurt me. And I used to give him money to go away for a holiday. Then I would give him money to spend for himself, to go away for a holiday, to spend some happy moments. But he would put that away too. But what does he do? That money also he would save. He will never go on a holiday trip. He will never have good food. He will never put on a good dress. He will put away all the money for his future. Once a man gets a fixed idea, there is nothing to be done, right? If a man has a fixed idea, fixed goal, nothing will work. It's because it's fixed there in his mind and he's going to do that, right? He has got that dream in his mind, so it's really difficult to change it. Years passed. He completed his 40th year and was still reading advertisement in the papers and saving up his money. And years passed and now he completed his 40th year and still he's reading the newspaper for the advertisement and he's saving his money. Then I heard he was married. Then later I came to know that my brother got married, still with the same idea of buying a farmhouse with a gooseberry bush. But this marriage was not because of his love or affection towards some ladies, only because of his dream, right? And still with the same idea of buying a farmhouse. His marriage also was with the same idea of buying a farmhouse with a gooseberry bush. He married an elderly, ugly widow. He married a lady with an elderly lady, a lady with having more age than him, ugly widow, not out of any feeling for her, but because she had money. He married her only because she was rich. With her, he still lived stinkily, and along with that lady also, he lived stinkily, kept her half-starved, and he kept that lady half-starved. He didn't give much food for her too, because his intention of marrying this lady was not enjoying his life. It was not to be a serious family man. It was just because this lady had money, right? So after marrying this lady, he still continued his life in the same way, stinkingly, without wearing good clothes, without having much food. And he starved this lady too, half starved, and put the money into the bank in his own name. And he put the money in the bank in his own name. Money like vodka can play cute tricks with a man. So this is a very important quote. Money like vodka can play cute tricks with man. Money makes many. You must have heard the proverb, right? Money makes many. The same way, money like vodka. What is vodka? A kind of liquor, right? Alcoholic, right? Alcoholic, which if you consume, you will forget this world, your surrounding, and you cannot control what do you do, what you say, right? Just like that, money like vodka can play cute tricks. Money can play strange tricks on you, right? If you got money, you'll forget so many things, right? Sometimes you'll forget your nearby ones. You'll forget the way, how did you come here? I don't mean you people, but that happens with people who get money, right? So money has that power. Money has the corrupting influence on human beings, right? It corrupts the human beings. Okay, so money like vodka can play cute tricks with a man. It can play strange tricks with a man. That's what I saw in my brother's case. As he got money, he forgot the life of his wife and he starved her. After the death of his wife, Ivan Ivanich continued after a long pause. So after the death of his wife, he married an elderly woman, widow, right? Because of her money. After her death, Ivan Ivanich continued. He continues his story. After a long pause, my brother began to look out for an estate. Now he has got enough money and now he's looking for an estate. Through an agent, my brother Nikolai raised a mortgage and bought 300 acres with a farmhouse. Then with an agent, he raised a mortgage. Mortgage means they came to a deal, signed some papers and came to a deal, and the agent will find some place for him and he will pay money. That's it. Okay. Raised a mortgage and bought 300 acres with a farmhouse, a cottage and a park, but there was no orchard. So all these things were there. 300 acres with farmhouse, cottage, a house was there, and a park, but there was no orchard. No trees were there. No farmings were there. No gooseberry bush. There was no gooseberry bush too. No duck pond. No duck pond. There was a river, but the water in it was coffee colored because the estate lay between a brickyard and a gelatin factory. So there was a river in the place, but the color in the water in the river, the color of the water in the river was just like that of a tea because it was close to a brickyard and a gelatin factory. So from wastages from the factory will come to the river and wastage from the brickyard will come to the river. So its color used to be just like that of a tea. Okay. But my brother Nikolai was not worried about that. So actually he was always looking for a farmland with gooseberry trees in it. But now he doesn't care for it. He was not worried about that. He ordered 20 gooseberry bushes and settled down to a country life. So he ordered for 20 gooseberry bushes and he planted them there in his place and he led a country life. Last year, I paid him a visit. I thought I would go and see how things were with him. So last year I went to meet him. I wanted to see how things are going. Right. In his letters, my brother called his estate Chimpar's Hoe Corner. Chimpar's Hoe Corner. So my brother had written to me, and in that letter he had called his estate Chimpar's Corner or Himalayski. I arrived at Himalayski in the afternoon. It was hot. So Ivanich paid a visit. There were ditches, fences, hedges, rows of young fruit trees everywhere. So in the place, all these things were the ditches were there for the water to pass. Fences were there. Hedges means plants planted in a row, right? Rows of young fruit trees were there. Trees everywhere, and there was no telling how to cross the yard or where to put your horse. So, but everything was there, but it was not mentioned there how to go there, how to cross the yard, or where can you stop your horse. It was not mentioned there. I went to the house and I was met by a red-haired dog. So I straightly went to the house and I met a dog, red-haired dog, as fat as a pig. It was just like a pig. It was so fat as a pig. He tried to bark but felt too lazy. But it wanted to bark because I am a new man for him, for the dog, and it wanted to bark, but he didn't because it was too fat and too lazy. So it just slumbered there without barking at him. Out of the kitchen came the cook. Then the cook came out barefooted and was as fat as a pig. And the cook also was as fat as a pig and said that the master was having his afternoon rest. And she said, the cook said that the master was having his afternoon rest. He is having his afternoon rest. I went into my brother and found him sitting on his bed with his knees covered with a blanket. Then I went to my brother. I saw him sitting there in his bed, covered his leg with a blanket. He looked old, stout. My brother looked old, stout, big, flabby. Flabby means extra fat. He's so fat. His cheeks, nose, and lips were pendulous. His cheeks, nose, everything were hanging, and lips were hanging pendulous. I half expected him to grunt like a pig. I thought he would grunt like a pig. He would make noise just like a pig because he too was fat. We embraced and shed a tear of joy and also of sadness to think that we had once been young. So as we met, we embraced, we hugged each other, we shed tears of happiness and sadness because we were young together, right? But we're now both going gray and nearing death. But now both of them are going gray and nearing death. Just and took me to see his estate. Then my brother got up and he dressed and he took me to show me his estate. Well, how are you getting on? I asked. How are you getting on? How is everything moving on? All right, thank God, I'm doing very well. Look at me to see. All right, thank God, I'm doing very well. He said, yes, everything is fine. I'm doing well, thank God. He was no longer the poor, tired official. He's not the old official who is so tired and poor, but a real landowner and a person of consequences, right? He's a real landowner and a person of importance, right? Because he has got a land, a farmhouse, right? And like a good landowner, he looked after his soul and did good works pompously. So just like any other landowner, he did all his works and he looked after himself and he did everything pompously with pride, right? Never simply, not just for the sake of doing, for others to show, for showing off, he did everything. What good works? He cured the peasant. What good works did he do? He cured the peasants of all kinds of disease with soda and castor oil. He would treat the peasant for all the disease. He would treat them using soda and castor oil. And on his birthday, he would have a Thanksgiving service. On his birthday, he would conduct some Thanksgiving service, Thanksgiving party held in the middle of the village, and would treat the peasants to half a bucket of vodka. And he would treat his peasants with half a bucket of vodka. He would distribute vodka to them all to make them happy, right, in the middle of the village, which he thought the right thing to do, because he thought that that's the right thing. That's how he can make people happy. Oh, these horrible buckets of vodka. Then he would give them the horrible bucket of vodka. That's what he thought to be the right thing to do. Okay, but my point does not concern him so much as myself. But my point does not concern him. It doesn't matter for him, right? He doesn't care. Only me, only I care for it. I want to tell you what a change took place in me in those few hours while I was in his house. And Ivan says, some change took place in myself when I visited. In the evening, while we were having tea, the cook laid a plate full of gooseberries on the table. Right, then in the evening when we were having our tea, the cook placed a plate full of gooseberries on the table. They had not been bought, but were his own gooseberries. Those gooseberries were not bought from outside. Those were from his own farm, right? His own gooseberries, plucked for the first time since the bushes were planted, right? This was the first time they plucked gooseberries from the bush they plant. Nikolai Ivanich laughed with joy, and for a minute or two he looked in silence at the gooseberries with tears in his eyes. He laughed. He was so happy to see these gooseberries because it was his dream to have gooseberries from his own land, right? So he looked 1 or 2 minutes at the gooseberries, and there were tears in his eyes. He could not speak for excitement. He could not speak for a while because of his excitement. Then put one into his mouth, glanced at me in triumph. He took one gooseberry from the plate and he put it in his mouth and glanced at me in triumph, like a child at last being given its favorite toy. So he looked just like a child who was given his favorite toy, right? He looked so happy and looked at me and said, how good they are, how good this gooseberry tastes. He went on eating greedily. He continued eating and saying all the while, how good they are. Do try one. How good, how tasty these gooseberries are. Try one, take one. He used to tell me. It was hard and sore, but I saw a happy man, one whose dearest dream had come true, who had attained his goal in life, who had got what he wanted and was pleased with his destiny and with himself. In my idea of human life, there is always some alloy of sadness, but now at the sight of a happy man, I was filled with something like despair, and at night it grew on me. Then Nikolai, he was picking up from the plate one by one the gooseberries, and he was having the gooseberry, and he felt it's very good, and he was asking Ivan to have one, right? It was hard and sour. The gooseberries in the plate was so hot and sour. As we all know, gooseberries doesn't taste good in the beginning, right? So it was hot and sour, but Nikolai felt it so good, and he was having many of them. But I saw a happy man, because Ivan saw a happy man, one whose dearest dream had come true. Because his dearest dream, as we all know, he dreamt of buying a farmland with a house and a pond with ducks, and with so many plants, right? Gooseberry plants and so on, right? Now all his dreams have come true. Dream had come true. Who had attained his goal in life, and he had attained his goal, had got what he wanted. Now he has got whatever he wanted. Now he's a happy man because he got his dream achieved and was pleased with his destiny. Now he is happy with his fate, is his destiny, and with himself. Now he feels content. He feels contented, satisfied. All his life before, it was so miserable. We have seen how meager his achievement was. How did he lead his life? Whom did he marry? Right, all those things we have seen. But at last, he could realize his dream. Now he is a happy man. In my idea of human life, there is always some alloy of sadness. That was the thought of Ivan. It's that he thought that always there will be something to be sad of, something to be worried about in our life. That's what he expected. In my idea of human life, there is always some alloy of sadness, some mixture of sadness in everybody's life. But now at the side of a happy man, I was filled with something like despair. But now I saw a happy man, Nikolai. He is such a happy man, and seeing him, I felt some kind of despair, because now he has to change his thought. He thought that there will always be some kind of sadness in the life of human being, but now I see Nikolai so happy with whatever he has, and at night it grew on me. Now Ivan felt so sad, and at night his sadness, his despair, his disappointment started to grow on. Yes. A bed was made up for me in the room near my brother's, and I could hear him, unable to sleep, going again and again to the plate of gooseberries. So his brother Nikolai treated him very well. His hospitality was very different. So he had arranged a bed nearby that of him for Ivanich to sleep. And at night, Nikolai was unable to get sleep, and he frequently he goes to the plate and take the gooseberries, and he takes the gooseberries again and again, because he was that happy. And this gooseberries was not bought, as you all know, right? It was plucked from the trees which were planted by Nikolai himself, right? So my brothers, and I could hear him, unable to sleep, going again and again to the plate of gooseberries. I thought, after all, what a lot of contented, happy people there must be. Then now Ivan started to think, always human life is not with the alloy of sadness. It need not to be sadness always with human beings. There will be so many people who are happy and contented. Happy people there must be. What an overwhelming power that means. What an overwhelming power. What a great power that means happiness. And such a state of things is obviously what we want. Actually, this is what we want, a happy, without a slight touch of sadness, right? Apparently, a very happy man only feels so because the unhappy bear their burden in silence. So, if you are happy, then you are happy, right? You are happy only if you think you are happy. And an unhappy man always will have to bear the burden of his unhappiness. So a happiness is a state of mind, actually, right? So if you think that you are happy, you will be happy always. Whatever you have, whatever you don't have, doesn't care, right? It has nothing to do with your happiness. If you think that you are happy, then you are happy. If you think that you are unhappy, you will have to bear the burden of your unhappiness. You will remain unhappy forever, right? Apparently, a happy man only feels so. A happy man will feel so that he is happy, and the unhappy bear their burden in silence. An happy man will have to bear the burden of his unhappiness in silence, but for which happiness would be impossible, and for him happiness would be impossible. If you think you are unhappy, You'll remain unhappy forever if you feel unhappy for lacking something. And you will never be satisfied at the same time. Even after having a lot of shortcomings, you feel that you're happy, then you'll remain happy forever. Yes. That night, I was able to understand how I too had been content and happy that night. When I saw Nikolai, the happy man, I also understood how I was able to understand how I too had been contented and happy. I too was happy then. Ivan Ivanich went on. He continued his story. Actually, this is a story told by Ivan Ivanich to his friends, Alyokin, Borkin, right? We remember, but it is a story within a story. And in this story, he is talking about Nikolai Ivanich, who is his brother. Okay, now he got up from his place and he went on, he continued his story. Freedom is a boon. It's a boon. It's a blessing. I used to say, as essential as the air we breathe. Freedom is a boon as essential as the freedom we breathe, but we must wait. That's what he used to say. We must wait until we get freedom. Freedom is such a blessing, but we must wait until we get. Yes, I used to say so, but now I ask, why do we wait? But now I ask, why should we wait? Is there any need for waiting for freedom? Why should we enjoy the freedom now itself? Ivan Ivanich glanced angrily at Burkin. Actually, this was his thought, and now he opposed his own thought. Right? He believed before that freedom is a boon and we should wait. But now he thinks freedom is a boon, it's a blessing, but why should we wait? And now he glanced angrily at Burkin. Why do we wait? I ask you, what consideration keep us fast? What consideration? Thinking of what we are holding up, we are waiting. I am told that we cannot have everything at once and that every idea is realized in time. I am told, someone told me before, everything has its own time. I am told that we cannot have everything at once. We won't get everything at once, and that every idea is realized in time. For everything there is some particular time, only at that time it will be realized. That's what I was told. Someone told me like this. But who says so? But now I ask, who says so? Why should we wait? Where is the proof that it is so? How can you believe so? Is there any proof with you? Tell me. I say, why should we wait? We can enjoy each and every moment of our life. We don't have to wait. Freedom is a boon, and I agree, and we don't want to wait. We can enjoy each and every moment in our life. We shouldn't wait. I left my brother early the next morning. He continues his story. I left my brother early the next morning, and from that time on, I found it is impossible to live in town. From that time onwards, I found it is impossible to live in town. So far, he was living in the town, and it didn't bother him. He didn't feel any kind of disturbance or difficulties to be there in town. Once he stayed with his brother in the country, in the village, as he experienced once more the country life. Now it was impossible to live in town. The peace and quiet of it oppressed me. I dare not look in at the windows, for nothing is more dreadful to see than the sight of a happy family sitting round a table having tea. Now he thinks that life in town is not that good. Country life is better. Right? Visiting Nikolai, he changed his attitude, he changed his vision, and nowadays he cannot look at the window and he cannot bear the sight of a happy family sitting around a table. Now as he sees a happy family sitting around a table and having tea, he feels some kind of despair because he didn't have any such goal in his life. Right? He was enjoying his life, in the city, in the town, and he enjoyed each and every moment. At the same time, his brother Nikolai had an aim, and he went through so many difficulties. He encountered a lot of challenges in his life. Even his marriage also was to get money from a widow lady, right? He married an old widowed lady, only looking at her, expecting to get her wealth, right? So as he had the dream and he realized it, now looking at a happy man, Ivan feels disturbed in his mind. Right? For nothing is more dreadful to see than the sight of a happy family sitting at a table, around a table and having tea. I'm an old man now and I'm no good for the struggle. No, I have grown old and I don't have time. I can't struggle. I can't set a goal and go for it. I can't. I'm no good for the struggle. I commenced late. I started late. I'm late. I can only grieve within my soul. Now I can only be sad, thinking of I was wrong. It was not the right thing to do. Right within my soul, and fret and sulk. Fret also feel worried. Sulk also feel angry. Fret means feel worried. Sulk means getting angry. So now I can only be disturbed in mind. Nothing is there is nothing that I can do now. At night my head buzzes with the rush of my thoughts and I cannot sleep. And at night I get a lot of thoughts in my mind. So in the beginning of the story we saw that it was raining, right, actually, and towards the end of the story also it is raining. Then the author uses rain as a symbol here. It might be representing the showering of thoughts. In everybody's mind there are a lot of thoughts. Thoughts are showering. And there is another importance for rain here. Rain brings a touch of misery, melancholic mood to the situation, right? So here we can see people are not completely happy always, right? Here, the one Ivan Ivanich, he thought that he was happy, but now he realized he is also not that happy, right? Okay, I cannot sleep. Or if I were young, now he thinks, oh my God, if I were young, I could set my goal and I could work for it if I were young. He thinks now. Ivan Ivanich walked excitedly up and down the room and repeated, if I were young. Now he is there in Alyokin's house, right, along with Volkin and his other friends. Okay, now he's walking here and there in Alyokin's house excitedly. He couldn't get sleep now. Ivan Ivanich walked excitedly up and down the room and repeated, if I were young. He suddenly walked up to Alyokin and shook him first by one hand, then by the other. Now he went to Alyokin's house and he shook him off. He wanted to wake him up. So he shook him and asked, Pavel Konstantinich, he said in a voice of entreaty, don't be satisfied. He calls him Ivanich, Pavel Konstantinich. Don't be happy, don't be satisfied. Don't let yourself be lulled to sleep. Just don't be happy with whatever happiness you have got. While you are young, strong, wealthy, do not cease to do good. He advises Alyokin, even though you are happy, just don't sleep like this. Don't be lulled with the happiness that you enjoy. Do good when you are young. So he says that the happiness is not just enjoying what you have got. Happiness is giving something to the others, doing good to others, right? So while you are young, strong, wealthy, do not cease to do good. Don't stop doing good things. Happiness does not exist. Happiness does not exist, nor should it. And if there is any meaning or purpose in life, they are not in our peddling little happiness, but in something reasonable and grand. Do good. He says, happiness does not exist. It is not pursuing whatever you think to be happy. Happiness is, if there is something named happiness, it is in doing good to others. And if there is any meaning or purpose in life, they are not in our peddling little happiness. It is not in pursuing our small happiness. Peddling means trifling with, spending time with trivial things, right? Small things. It is not peddling little happiness. It's not enjoying your little happiness, but in something reasonable and grand. Happiness is something reasonable and grand. Do good things to others. That is happiness. So he says there is nothing more happy, nothing gives you more happiness than seeing others happy because of you. You do good things to others and you see them happy. This is the most it is the happiest thing you can ever do. Okay. Then they all three sat in different corners of the drawing room and were silent. That all the three were listening to Ivan and they were silent. Ivan Ivanich's story had satisfied neither Burkin nor Alyokin. His story didn't satisfy them. They were not moved by the story. It was tedious to hear the story of a miserable official who ate gooseberries. It was tedious. It was very difficult to listen to a story of an official who ate gooseberries. he spent his whole life miserably following his happiness, and when he got his happiness, he was too old, right? Actually, through this story, the author tries to bring out the idea that happiness differs from person to person. What is happiness to you may not be happiness to the other person. What he thinks happiness may not be happiness for someone else, right? So happiness differs person to person, right? For Nikolai Ivanich, he felt he was happy. At the same time, from the point of view of Ivan, he was leading a miserable life. Right, in the beginning, he was leading a miserable life, and at the same time, Nikolai felt happy at that time too. Right, and in the case of Ivan Ivanich, he felt he was happy in the beginning, but now he does not feel that happy. Right, so happiness is something different, and these people could not enjoy the story of Ivan Ivanich. It was tedious to hear the story of a miserable official who ate gooseberries. Somehow they had a longing to hear and to speak of charming people and of women. Actually, they were expecting some other stories, charming stories, okay, of charming people and of women. And the mere fact of sitting in the drawing room was much better than any story. And mere sitting here in the drawing room is better than listening to such tedious stories, they thought. It is better to sit here simply without doing anything. Alyoshin wanted very much to go to bed. He thought Alyoshin, the host, wanted very much to go to bed. He had to get up for his work very early because the next day he will have to get up to get ready for his job. He's working. He's finding happiness that way, working so hard in his field. And he has got a very good house, 2-story. He has got a very good bathhouse. Still, he didn't get time to take his bath. Because his happiness, he found happiness in working so hard, right? So hard, tediously, right? So get up for his work very early, about 2 in the morning. 2 in the morning he will have to get up. And now his eyes were closing. Now it's late at night and he terribly wanted to get sleep. However, it's time to go to bed, said Borkin, getting up. Borkin also said, now it's time to go to bed. I will wish you a good night. I will wish everyone a good night. And Borkin also goes to the bed. Alyoshin said good night and went downstairs. Alyoshin saying good night, went downstairs and left his guests there. He left his guests there in the first floor. Each had a large room with an old wooden bed and carved ornaments. So each one, Borkin, Ivan, each one got separate bed, wooden bed and carved ornaments. It was carved, decorated with ornaments. Ivan Ivanich undressed in silence and lay down. He changed his clothes and lay down. God, forgive me, a wicked sinner, he murmured. He murmured, God, forgive me, I am a sinner, as he drew the clothes over his head. The rain beat against the window all night long. He thought that he was a sinner. When he was young, he didn't do much good things to make others happy. That's how he find happiness, right? As I said, happiness is different thing. For Alyoshin, it is working so hard. That's happiness. For Nikolai, it is another thing, right? And for Ivan Ivanich, he thinks that happiness is doing good things to others. And he says, God, forgive me. I couldn't do much for my fellow beings, right? I'm a wicked sinner, he murmured as he drew the clothes over his head. The rain beat against the window all night long, and still it was raining. So as I said, rain represents the thoughts of human mind. It never ceases, it never stops. It pours out in hundreds, right? So in this story, the author uses so many symbols, right? A symbol of the dog, a fat dog, red color, and the symbol of families sitting around the table, right? Rain is the major symbol which represents the thoughts in human mind. Okay, that's all the story. Hope you understood and enjoyed the story. Read it carefully and understand the meaning. If you find it difficult to understand some parts, you can watch the video, and still you find it hard to understand, you can contact me through WhatsApp. I'll be responding. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.